You know that person at the party who barely speaks but somehow knows everyone's secrets? They're not psychic. Their brain is just wired differently than yours. While you're busy planning what to say next, they're reading micro-expressions you didn't even know you were making. And science shows they're probably better at understanding you than you are at understanding yourself. Here's what most people get wrong about quiet observers. We assume silence means someone has nothing to contribute. But psychologists have a different term for what these people are doing: high social vigilance. They're not checked out. They're collecting data at a rate that would overwhelm most of us. Carl Jung identified this split back in the 1920s when he introduced the concepts of introversion and extroversion. But he wasn't talking about shyness or social skills. He was describing how different brains process energy and information. Introverts turn inward to recharge. Extroverts seek external stimulation. And here's where it gets interesting. Brain scans show introverts have significantly higher blood flow to their frontal lobe, the region responsible for memory, problem solving, and planning ahead. Your quiet coworker isn't slow to respond in meetings because they're disengaged. Their brain is examining the question from multiple angles, cross-referencing past data, and formulating a response that's actually thought through. Meanwhile, the loudest person in the room is already on their third half-baked idea. There's another neurological difference that explains why observers prefer watching to participating. Dopamine, the reward chemical that floods your brain during social interaction, doesn't affect everyone the same way. Extroverts get an excited buzz from the same amount of dopamine that leaves introverts feeling drained and overstimulated. It's not a choice or a personality flaw. It's brain chemistry. Think about the last group conversation you had. Who was talking? Probably the same 2 or 3 people dominating the entire exchange. Now think about who actually understood what was happening beneath the surface. I'd bet it was the person who said the least. Yale researchers discovered something that challenges everything we assume about social intelligence. When they tested people's ability to understand human behavior, the shy and melancholic individuals definitively outperformed the jovial, friendly ones. Not slightly better. Definitively better. The researchers theorized that people who spend less time interacting spend more time observing, and observation builds more accurate internal models than participation does. Here's why that matters in your daily life. The talkers in any room are busy planning their next sentence. The observers are busy noticing that your smile didn't reach your eyes when you said you were fine. They caught the swallowed sigh when someone mentioned your partner. They heard the half-second pause before you answered that simple question. They're not saying anything, but they already know the emotional reality of the entire room. Psychologists call this theory of mind, the ability to imagine what others are thinking and feeling. And quiet observers score off the charts. They've spent years building databases of human behavior. They know what a forced laugh sounds like. They recognize when someone's being polite versus genuinely interested. They can tell the difference between comfortable silence and awkward silence. These are skills most people never develop because they're too busy broadcasting to receive. But here's what makes observant people truly different. They notice details everyone else filters out. Someone gets a haircut. You might notice if it's dramatic. An observer notices and files it away without comment. Your tone shifted slightly when discussing work. Most people miss it entirely. The observer caught it and is now wondering what's really going on. You wore different shoes than usual. Completely irrelevant information that their brain automatically catalogs anyway. This isn't about being nosy or judgmental. It's about how their attention system works. While you're focusing on the conversation topic, their peripheral awareness is soaking up everything else. The room temperature, the background music, the tension between 2 people across the room who think nobody notices, the way someone keeps checking their phone. All of this data gets processed simultaneously without conscious effort. Research shows this observational capacity translates into serious advantages. Observers excel at analytical thinking, because they naturally break problems into smaller components. They spot patterns others miss, which gives them an edge in everything from investing to relationships. They can sustain focus for hours without getting distracted, and their memory for details and past experiences is typically superior because they're encoding more information in the first place. Active listening, the thing observers do naturally, creates measurable benefits for everyone around them. Studies on workplace dynamics found that employees with supervisors who practice active listening report significantly lower stress levels. Research on romantic relationships showed that active listening during arguments was positively related to problem solving and relationship stability, while reducing intrusive thoughts. When the Center for Creative Leadership studied employee satisfaction, they found that perception of being heard was twice as strong when leaders actually listened and took action. The people who speak most in any room are sometimes the least updated about its emotional reality. They trust what's said out loud. Observers trust the friction beneath the surface. And that difference reveals something crucial about how observation actually works as a psychological skill. Understanding observation as a skill rather than just a personality trait changes everything about how we view quiet people. Brain imaging research reveals something fascinating about introverts versus extroverts. Introverts show significantly higher blood flow to their frontal lobe, the brain region responsible for problem solving, planning ahead, and memory formation. This isn't a subtle difference. It's measurable and consistent across studies. Their brains are literally wired for deeper processing. But there's another neurological difference that explains why introverts prefer observation to participation. Dopamine, the chemical that creates that buzz of excitement in social situations, affects introvert and extrovert brains completely differently. The same amount that energizes an extrovert's reward centers leaves introverts feeling drained and overstimulated. This is why observers naturally limit their verbal output. They're managing their neurological energy budget. Think about what this means practically. An observer walks into a networking event. Everyone else is working the room, initiating conversations, projecting energy. The observer finds a strategic position and watches. Within 20 minutes, they've identified who holds real influence versus who just talks loudly. They've spotted the genuine connections versus the transactional interactions. They know which conversations have substance and which are performance. All without saying much of anything. This isn't antisocial behavior. It's information gathering on a level most people can't access because they're too busy participating. The paradox is that participation itself limits perception. When you're actively engaged in conversation, your brain enters multitasking mode, juggling what to say next, how you're being perceived, maintaining eye contact, processing incoming information. Extroverts excel at this kind of mental juggling, but observers take a different approach. By speaking less, they free up cognitive resources for something more valuable: comprehensive environmental scanning. Many observers develop their skills as survival mechanisms. A parent whose mood could shift without warning. A classroom where visibility meant vulnerability. These environments taught them to read micro-expressions as emotional weather forecasts. That slight tension around someone's eyes before they explode, the particular quality of silence before criticism, the shift in posture that signals withdrawal. For these observers, paying attention wasn't optional. It was protection. As adults, this hypervigilance remains, now refined into extraordinary interpersonal intelligence. But here's where society creates a problem for observers. Western culture transformed over the past century from valuing character to worshiping personality. Susan Cain's research documents this shift thoroughly. We moved from appreciating quiet competence to demanding constant performance. Open office plans. Collaborative everything. Extroversion as the default professional standard. This cultural bias creates what Cain calls a colossal waste of talent, because observation-based skills get systematically undervalued. The quiet person in the meeting who speaks once but says something profound gets less credit than the person who contributed 10 mediocre ideas enthusiastically. We've built systems that reward volume over insight. The irony is that introverted leaders often outperform extroverted ones in specific contexts. They're calm under pressure. They genuinely consider input from others rather than just waiting to speak. Their decisions are more thoroughly considered because they've spent time thinking instead of immediately reacting. While extroverts are verbalizing half-formed thoughts, introverts are internally stress-testing their ideas from multiple angles. This doesn't make one approach better than the other. It makes them suited for different situations. But our cultural bias blinds us to when observation-based leadership would serve us better than charisma-based leadership. There's also a critical distinction most people miss. Introversion isn't shyness. Introversion is about how you process energy. Introverts recharge alone and find socializing effortful. Shyness is fear-based, an emotional response to social situations. You can be a confident introvert who simply prefers smaller gatherings and meaningful conversations over large parties and small talk. Many secure, authentic people are the quietest in any room. Not because they're afraid, but because they don't need external validation. They're not chasing attention. They're creating space for others to be heard. What observers offer that talkers cannot is emotional accuracy. They're not filtering reality through their own need to contribute or perform. They're receiving information as it actually is. That person who says they're fine but whose hands are trembling slightly. The couple who claims everything's great but sits with 6 inches of careful distance between them. The colleague who laughs at every joke but whose eyes remain flat. Observers catch all of it. They build internal databases of human behavior so extensive and accurate that their intuitions about people are rarely wrong. When an observer tells you something feels off about a situation, believe them. They've processed 1,000 data points you didn't even notice existed. The next time you're in a room and you notice the person who's barely said anything, recognize what you're actually seeing. Not someone who has nothing to contribute. Someone who's already contributed more than you realize by truly understanding what's actually happening. While everyone else was broadcasting, they were receiving. And reception, it turns out, might be the most underrated communication skill we have. Here's the reality nobody wants to admit. The quietest person in your life probably understands you better than anyone who won't stop talking. That's not a judgment on extroversion. It's just recognition that observation is a form of intelligence we've been trained not to value. So maybe next time you're in a conversation, try being the one who listens more than you speak. You might be surprised by what you suddenly start noticing about everyone around you.